Today is April 21st, 2022. My name is Joe Todd, and this is an interview with Amy Hendrix in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Ma'am, where were you born?
I was born in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. At Deaconess Hospital, actually, which doesn't exist anymore.
Yes. When's your birthday?
June 4th, 1975.
1975. Who is your father?
It's Clifford Harold Whistler, and it's Whistler.
Okay.
There's no T.
And your mother?
Is Janet Catherine Whistler.
What's her maiden name?
Hartmann, Hartmann.
N.
She's very German.
Where'd you go to school?
Northwest Classen.
What elementary school?
Oh, my elementary was Monroe Elementary.
Okay.
In Oklahoma City.
Okay.
And
Northwest Classen?
And then Northwest Classen High School.
You graduated what year?
93.
93. Who was your favorite teacher?
Mrs. Jean Hendrickson, 3rd grade.
Why? Why was she your favorite?
She's special, and I know her as an adult now, so it's all come full circle, but she treated every student as an individual and would help them flourish to their potential given their positive traits that they had, and she was able to identify that with children. And then in arts education, she's a leader in arts education, I think, at least nationally, if not internationally. So she's gone on in education to do more into the arts. But
okay.
she makes everyone feel super special.
Yes. What type of work did your father do?
He was a mechanic.
Mechanic.
He's
Auto mechanic?
Auto mechanic, specializing in Italian sports cars, specifically Alfa Romeo. So if you drove an Alfa Romeo in Oklahoma or in the surrounding states from 1970 to 2010, you know my dad.
Yes. What type of chores do you do around the house?
Chores?
Yes, when you were a little girl.
Oh, when I was little. Washing the dishes, because we didn't have a dishwasher. So I do remember washing a lot of dishes, sweeping, and easy house cleaning stuff.
Mm-hmm. What did you do after high school?
I went to school at University of Central Oklahoma part-time, and I worked full-time at a t-shirt store, which is funny. And then I moved on to another retail establishment called County Seat. So I worked full-time, and then I went to school part-time.
And what was your major?
A Bachelor of Science in Business Marketing. And I finished, but it took 7 years.
7 years.
Yep.
Okay. Did you live on campus?
No. I lived in several different places while I was in college, but never on campus. I was not a traditional student, so since you aren't full-time student, you don't get that luxury.
Now,
of
did
campus.
you live at home? Or?
I lived with a boyfriend for a while, and then I lived at home for a while, and then I lived with a roommate for a while, and so 7 years, that's a lot of moving around, right?
Yes,
7
yes,
years? So
yes.
Here, there, and everywhere.
What was campus like in the 70s?
So it would have been I was in college
No,
in
not the 70s, in the
90s.
90s.
So I had such a non-traditional college experience, I don't know, honestly. Mm-hmm. So I worked and went to class and turned around and worked. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there were campus activities, but I really didn't participate in campus activities just because of the nature of being a part-time student.
Yes. You received your degree what year?
2000.
2000.
Ooh, can we pause for 2 seconds?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Okay. What did you do after you got your degree?
I worked at University of Phoenix in Oklahoma City as a counselor, enrollment counselor.
University of Phoenix.
They have online classes. It's for adult education, so it's people who did not go to traditional school, so similar to my experience, and they need a non-traditional learning environment. So most of the students work full time, and then they go to school one night a week, or they go into online classes. So because I had that non-traditional experience, was able to help, and then I got my master's while I was there.
Okay.
But it was in Oklahoma City.
Yes, your master's in?
I have an MBA in Human Resource Management.
Okay. From?
University of Phoenix.
Oh, University of Phoenix.
In Oklahoma. So I got my master's from the school that I was working for.
Yes.
For free, which was nice.
Yeah. How long did you work for them?
5 years.
5 years. Where did you meet your husband?
At Groovies.
Groovies.
Groovies is a disco-style bar in Oklahoma City. Dance bar.
A dance bar.
A dance club bar with kind of retro disco-style music and fun. And I saw him across the room, and I went up to him.
What's his name?
His name is Jeff Hendrix.
Jeff Hendrix. When did you get married?
2003.
2003. Okay. And are you still working now?
Yes.
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 Where do you work now?
So I work for Santa Fe Pharmaceuticals,
Okay.
and I sell insulin.
Okay.
So I'm in healthcare-ish.
Tell me about your daughter.
So my daughter is Parker Hendrix, and she's currently 13 years old, but when I was pregnant with her in 2008, at 18 weeks gestation, we learned that she had an incurable brain malformation called hydrocephalus. And so we learned that in utero and had time to research and prepare even before she was born.
Okay, what is it?
So hydrocephalus is an overaccumulation of cerebral spinal fluid in the brain. So you have ventricles that allows the spinal fluid to flow freely in your brain. With hydrocephalus, there's usually some sort of blockage, and it's unable to flow freely. So they saw the blockage when I was pregnant with her, and the ventricles in the brain would grow exponentially beyond what they normally should be, which compresses the brain structures towards the
Now
skull.
you say ventricles of the brain.
Ventricles. So there's these ventricles in the brain that allows the spinal fluid to flow freely.
Yes.
So there's choroid plexus is in your brain, and that's how the spinal fluid is created. And those are in the ventricles. And so if there's a blockage is when hydrocephalus occurs, or if there's too much fluid or there's not enough absorption. So there's a couple different ways that you can have hydrocephalus. And I always say it's the most common condition no one's ever heard of, because you would know a friend of a friend. I guarantee you have someone in your life that has hydrocephalus and you don't even know it. Because it's actually, there's 1 million people in America living with hydrocephalus today. Okay. So it's common, and so the prognosis can vary wildly. Those with congenital, like my daughter, typically have more challenges than those who have acquired. So you can actually acquire hydrocephalus from meningitis or from a brain bleed, which happens commonly with preterm babies, or it can happen in adults. It's in the elderly actually commonly misdiagnosed as dementia. So it can actually come on if you're 50, 60, 70, 80 years old, you can acquire it. So there's many different ways, but in her case, it was just something that did not form properly early in gestation in her brain.
Okay. Is there anything they could do for it while she's in the womb?
No. So there have been studies in the 80s. They did, so what the treatment option is most often is a shunt in the brain. So they will put a distal catheter into it's a proximal catheter actually. The proximal catheter goes into the ventricle to pull the fluid off, and then there's a valve that allows it to have some pressure or not pressure, whatever is perfect for the person. And then that fluid is actually drained normally into the abdomen. And so there's tubing that goes all the way down into the brain. So that's how she was treated when she was born. But that process is more complicated when they are in utero. There are studies, but it's just the risks outweigh the benefits with fetal surgeries. Yes. But who knows what the future holds.
Now, what is the shunt?
A shunt is something that will pull the fluid off and take it and put it in a different area.
Okay, now do they actually drill into the...
Yes. Okay. So it's an implanted device in her skull. Okay. And so it has a tube that runs from the device itself, that's a valve, into the ventricles where the fluid's not draining properly. So it's pulling it off, and then it will redirect it to a different place. And so that valve tells you how much pressure to put on or put off. And then the distal tubing runs through the side of her neck, and then it's coiled into her abdomen. And when she was born, she had the shunt placed the next day after she was born. And so she was preterm, actually. So we opted to have her early, so we had her at 32 weeks, 6 days gestation, so that's almost 2 months premature. So she was born on August 26th. My due date was October 15th. And we knew that getting her out and getting her shunted was important to us, and so we were able to do that, which is a little bit controversial. So she received her shunt and all of her tubing the day after she was born, and if things go well, then she has enough distal tubing in her abdomen to grow to adulthood. So they coil a bunch of tubing in the abdomen, so as they grow, they don't have to replace that. The bad thing about a shunt is it has the most malfunctions of any other medical device. So she has had 3 total in her life. She's 13, and that's actually not bad in comparison. So my godson actually has the same condition, but he was born 2 years before my daughter. So he was born preterm, he had meningitis, and then he had a brain bleed. He developed hydrocephalus as an infant. So he has a shunt, and he had 8 his first year of life. And then he's had the same one for a while now. But I had already lived that with my good friend and my godson, so I knew what the condition was. I knew what the treatment options were. So her having that condition was different for me because I already knew all about it, whereas most people, when they're diagnosed with this condition, would have no clue anything at all about it. So I had a little bit of a head start in the education on hydrocephalus because of my godson.
Now, the information you sent me is said if they don't do this, the skull will...
It's fatal. I mean, hydrocephalus is fatal, and in many countries, that's the prognosis, because they don't have health care like we do in the United States, and they don't have neurosurgeons, they don't have imaging, they don't have any of these. And so, because meningitis is a very common way to acquire this, if you think of like sub-Saharan Africa, meningitis with water that's not very clean, it's very common for a baby to acquire this condition and then pass away because it's not treated just because of healthcare. So yes, that's correct. If untreated, she would have passed. I mean, I don't know what her life expectancy would have been if she was untreated.
Okay. Now, how did you, as a caretaker, what did you do for your daughter? How did you take care of her?
Well, so in utero, I did a lot of research. And so I found out that the condition's not uncommon, and I found that at Duke University, they were doing a stem cell infusion with cord blood. So it's actually her own cord blood. So when I gave birth, they collected that cord blood, and then I banked it. And then she was born at OU Medical Center in Oklahoma City, and I'm very thankful for the neurosurgeons and the treatment that we received at OU Medical Center Children's Hospital. It was phenomenal. So she was there for a little over a month, and then we took her to Duke University to have her stem cells re-infused, which is completely experimental, and that's all anecdotal accounts of this being beneficial for patients. I can say I believe it was instrumental in helping my daughter achieve her potential. And I don't know what her prognosis would have been had we not done the stem cell infusion. So I think it was research that I did that allowed us to get to Duke University, and I think that it changed her path. And so she is medically complicated. However, she walks and talks and has quirks, but her overall prognosis is completely different because of, I believe, the stem cells. Okay. So I think that the stem cells really helped. So as far as helping my daughter, another resource that I learned about early in my pregnancy was a daycare center called Special Care. And it's in Oklahoma City, and I'm forever indebted to Special Care. So they have about half of their students have special needs, and half of their students are completely typical. and they integrate those two together. Their child to daycare worker or child care worker ratio is much smaller than you would find at a normal daycare center because they have so many children with special needs. So finding special care, because I have this special daughter that I've just given birth to, and then I wanted to continue to work if possible. So I feel that had I not had special care and the people there that I felt could take care of my daughter, I'm not sure whether I would have been able to go back to work. I don't think I would have. So we also have early intervention services in Oklahoma called Sooner Start. And so she started receiving those therapies. So she had a nurse that came and checked on her. She had an occupational therapist and a developmental therapist and a vision therapist that would all meet with her. And they would actually come to special care, and I would come to the therapy visits, and then we would learn different therapies to try to help her, whether it would be gross motor skills or her vision that wasn't so good at the beginning. So I think those are, in answer to your question, I think those are some of the things that I did early on in her development that have helped her.
Now, how do they do the stem cell infusion?
So it is uncommon and unusual. So I read about it on a blog that a mother whose child had hydrocephalus went to Duke and asked them if they would infuse their daughter with, or their son with, cord blood. So cord blood is often just discarded, but those are stem cells. And so you can choose to have the cord blood saved, and then you could actually donate that. We don't have a cord blood institute in Oklahoma, but in other areas, so at the Carolinas cord blood, which is where her stem cells are right now, at the Carolinas Cord Blood Institute, you would send them, and then they would actually analyze them, and they might use those. You could donate it and use those for patients that had leukemia or any of the other conditions we know that cord blood stem cells can help. They have a whole experimental side where you can take these cord blood cells, and for cerebral palsy, there actually was a study that showed a benefit for children who had their own cord blood re-infused back in, it's just an IV, so it's not anything invasive at all. And they did show a potential for those children to develop better than the group who did not receive the stem cells. So the cerebral palsy experimentation was going on, and then hydrocephalus is not cerebral palsy, but it's another brain condition. So in theory, stem cells, when they're infused, are remapping cells. So they go into the body, and then they will find damaged areas of whatever needs to be fixed. In her case, she had optic nerve atrophy. So your optic nerves are supposed to be orange and vibrant in color and thick, and hers were gray and pale and thin because your optic nerves, her head swelled so large in utero that they were just stretched thin. So the prognosis was that she was going to have significant visual impairment. And she had nystagmus, which is shaking of the eyes, when she was born. And the ophthalmologist felt that probably that would have been her vision would be one of the things that would be most severely impacted by her having hydrocephalus. And it makes sense. So when she was born, she was 2 months early, but her head was the size of a 9-month-old baby. So a normal term baby at 40 weeks, their head circumference is about 34 centimeters. At 2 months early, her head was 43 centimeters. My head is 54. So her head was significantly enlarged, and then her body was premature because I had her 2 months early. So she had a very, very, very tiny body and a very, very large head. And since the skull is not fused, in theory, their heads can grow as big as they can. So that's why she didn't pass away in utero, because the skull is not fused. Once the skull starts to fuse, then that's when there's no relief of the pressure, and therefore it would be fatal at that point. But the good news is that in utero, her head was able to expand and accommodate the fluid. And then obviously once she was born, we were able to surgically accommodate the fluid with a shunt.
Did she attend public schools?
She does. She's 13. She does
Okay.
today.
Now, when
yes.
she started school, how did the other students treat her?
So she, I feel like we're lucky, and she has not had a lot of adversity because of her condition. She is in special education classes, and we had an IEP because of her disability early.
IEP.
Individualized education plan.
Okay.
So IEP is common in anyone that goes to public school that has some sort of challenge. They do thorough testing to determine what the challenges are, and then they would put together a plan to help accommodate those issues that the child has specifically. So it is individual. It is to Parker. It is my daughter's 100% her plan, and she has use of a calculator in math class, and she has extra time on her tests. She also has tests orally given to her, so she can take tests one-on-one with someone, and they can ask her questions and then get the answers orally instead of having to read or to write that. And so there's certain accommodations that have helped her. She also has another condition. She has a lot of brain conditions. So hydrocephalus is her initial issue. From that, she has agenesis of the corpus callosum. So your corpus callosum is the connective tissues between the two hemispheres of your brain. Because of her hydrocephalus, the hemispheres of her brain were very far apart. And so she doesn't have those connective tissues. And so a lot of times that can be like your midline. So being able to have midline, what we do on a daily basis that you do every single day, and having both sides of your brain work together, she doesn't have that. But through accommodations and through therapies along the way, she has compensated for this agenesis of the corpus callosum. She has epilepsy, and she also has another condition called Chiari, which is where your brainstem, your cerebellum, dips too low into your spinal column, and so that's another condition that has occurred because of the hydrocephalus too. So she's got all sorts of cornucopia of brain abnormalities.
Now, does hydrocephalus affect each person differently?
Absolutely. The prognosis is wild. So it can absolutely, you can be completely, most children with hydrocephalus that are diagnosed as babies have some sort of developmental delay. So most of them all go through earlier intervention, and they get a physical therapy or cognitive therapy. In the form that she has, 40% as adults will be neurotypical, but 60% will have neuro challenges or gross motor challenges. And it's cortical mantle, which is outside of your brain. The cortical mantle thinning was part of your brain, but the cortical mantle, how thin that is kind of depends somewhat on your prognosis. And so her cortical mantle was like, it was a sliver, very, very, very thin. So her prognosis was going to be that she was definitely going to be in the 60% that have more challenges beyond those that can be fixed with early intervention therapies. So we knew early on that it was unlikely that she would lead a typical life long term. But yes, some can, but hers probably not.
What is the treatment for hydrocephalus?
It's the shunt.
The shunt.
The shunt is one treatment, and it's a mechanical device that has a high failure rate. So it's not but I'm thankful that it exists. So it was developed in the late 50s. And I'm thankful, but it hasn't evolved and advanced much since the 50s.
Yes.
So that same shunt that has this high failure rate is still being placed in children that have or adults that have hydrocephalus. The failure rate is over a 20-year span. 90% of patients over 20 years will have more than one shunt, more than one revision. So 90%. So you do have 10% that can live 20 plus years with the same device. So that's great for those 10%. Within the 90%, though, you have 5% that is 10 plus surgeries over that 20 years. I know people who have had hundreds of shunts. So, my daughter's had 3, so I feel like we're fortunate. My godson, I think, has had 8 or 9, 10. He's had 10, let's say. So it's not uncommon to see a wide spectrum of device failure too. So sometimes you get really lucky and sometimes you just have problem after problem after problem. There is an alternative to a shunt called an ETV. So it's an endoscopic third ventrilostomy. So basically there's that blockage. So she has blockage in her ventricles. So you've got lateral ventricles on either side, and there's a third ventricle and then a fourth ventricle. And her blockage is in between the third ventricle and the fourth ventricle. It's called aqueductal stenosis. So what they can do is they can drill a hole into the third ventricle, and that's the way the fluid can come out. However, the success rate on babies is low. So there has been some research, and as you grow older, the success of that surgery is actually quite high. So our current plan is that when her shunt fails, not if, because it will fail, when her shunt fails, she is a good candidate at this time for that ETV. So our hope is that when our shunt fails, we can have the other device-free option. But, it's just timing on whether, when that might happen. But it could happen today. It could happen now, right now.
So is the shunt the only thing they can do for hydrocephalus?
Besides the ETV. So those are the two, yes. Treatment options are all surgical. Yes. And they all have failure rates.
How's your daughter doing now?
So she's in 7th grade at Piedmont Elementary, Piedmont, the middle school of Piedmont. They don't, because it's PMS, is Piedmont Middle School, and they don't like PMS, so now it's the middle school of Piedmont. I have to say that correctly because they are very particular about it being MPS and not PMS. So middle school of Piedmont. So she is in middle school in 7th grade, and she has special education classes for her English and her math, and then for her other core classes, so science and social studies, she has a paraprofessional that will come and help her in those classes that she's integrated in with other students. So in her special education classes, it's this very small classroom, and they all have special education needs. And then in her larger classes, she has this paraprofessional that will help her with her assignments and keep her on track. You had asked earlier about the how other students feel about her, and I'd say that we're really well supported, and I think that might be uncommon, but if there's bullying going on, I don't know about it, and she doesn't know about it because she knows what that is. But another strange thing about hydrocephalus that we've found, I'm connected with a lot of families that have kids with hydrocephalus. They're all very innocent in the way they think. It's almost like those of us who don't have these, brain malformations get jaded, and I don't know if the negativity of the world kind of impacts us a little bit more deeply, but I feel like with her, if someone was bullying her, I don't even know if she would know it, because she just loves everyone, and she has this just zest for life. And someone at our Sunday school came to me when she was in elementary school and told me, we were going around the room asking what makes you sad, and Parker couldn't think of one thing, not one thing that makes her sad. And if you asked her, she would say she's never had a bad day. She loves life to the core, and that is, I think, part of her condition. So, because it's kind of a common trait within our kids that it's not like they're oblivious to the world, but they see the best. It's really wild with her. So, I feel fortunate that she has that. She tries her hardest. She puts every effort into the things that she can do, and she knows she can't do them as well as someone who doesn't have this condition, but it doesn't stop her, and she continues to be determined and try her hardest. So I feel like that's the best thing a parent could ask for. And she's in the Special Olympics. She's actually participating tomorrow. They're doing a cornhole in the Special Olympics tomorrow.
What is the life expectancy of hydrocephalus?
So it's hard to say because with untreated hydrocephalus is fatal. Treated hydrocephalus has a pretty normal life expectancy, is what we think. But if you remember, the first shunts were just developed in the 50s.
Yes.
So there's a first generation that are now in their 50s and 60s. The mortality of that generation was like 95%. So the ones who survived having hydrocephalus in the 1950s and 60s are who we look to now, and I know quite a few of them who were the first generation. However, it appears anecdotally that that generation seemed to be the ones who had more mild cases that weren't as severe, and that's why they survived, because the mortality was so high back then. So the mortality now is the other way. The mortality of a patient with hydrocephalus is 5%, not 95%. So there would be a 5% mortality rate, but we don't really know whether the life expectancy is compromised because they're only in their 60s that had treatment. So I'm hoping she lives a long life, but I'm also not naive, because we lost one of, a 14-year-old boy recently, and he lived in Nebraska, lived very, very, very similar to my daughter, and had a shunt malfunction and seizures, and he passed away. So, I mean, I know that her life is precious, and I cherish every single day because of that.
What does she want to do?
With her life?
Yes.
Well, she loves children, so she wants to be a mom and have like 50 kids. She likes to watch all those TV shows on TLC that about having a lot of children. She likes Doubling Down with the Doricos is on my DVR, but I don't know, they have 14 kids. I don't even know how many kids they have, but she really, really wants to be a mom one day. And I don't know if that is, I think clinically possible, but cognitively, I don't know if that's a possibility for her to have children. So right now at 13, she is also very interested in medical anomaly shows. So she likes to watch shows about the ER, and so what happens in the emergency room, and she likes to watch YouTube videos about people with diabetes, and she's just very, very, very fascinated by medical anomalies. And so she said, I want to be an ER physician, and I think cognitively that's probably not something that she is. I don't know, I will put no limitations on her, but at this point I think that's probably not something that she would be able to achieve. But she really likes medical healthcare stuff, and then she also likes children. So I don't know if maybe working in special care, the daycare, might be in her future, or working in a hospital. She has a pretty infectious personality, so I see her talking and being friendly, or I don't know. So that's I guess the short answer, which isn't short.
Now you said this is cognitive.
Her challenges are cognitive, and with hydrocephalus, you never know whether they're going to have cognitive and or motor challenges.
Now what is cognitive?
Brain. How your brain works.
Okay.
So she has some fine motor challenges, but with technology, that's actually, she's overcome a lot of things like being able to use a computer instead of handwriting things. So she still can't tie her shoes, and she's 13 years old. So there's some fine motor challenges. She's not going to, I don't know, we're still working on that. Mm-hmm. But the cognitive challenges that are common with hydrocephalus, short-term memory disability is common. That's globally, almost everyone with hydrocephalus has pretty significant short-term memory problems. And she definitely does, because she will ask me the question that I answered 5 minutes ago, she'll ask me again. But with technology, I'm thankful that exists. So on her 13th birthday, she was able to get a phone. I gave her a phone, and now looking back, I should have given her a phone years ago, because it probably would have saved all those millions of questions. So she just sent me a text message earlier today about her schedule with school. She strives and really flourishes with a very structured schedule. So she knows she's going to school today, and then she's going to get off the bus, and she really enjoys that. But there's a few little changes to her schedule, like with the Special Olympics tomorrow. I drop her off at a different place. So she's asked me about that multiple times. So I've just said, put it in your calendar. And so when she does put things in her calendar, she will refer back to the calendar. So the short-term memory, and then her IQ, she's had it tested several times. Her IQ does put her in the intellectually disabled category. However, it would be a surprise to most people that talk to her because they don't, in a conversation with her, you wouldn't probably understand that disability, the cognitive part of it. But I think the memory issues really, really impact her life. But thanks to technology.
Is this hereditary?
No. Well, it can be. So I think my answer is always yes, but. So there are genetic forms of hydrocephalus. And there's great, I'm involved with a research program right now at Yale University, and they're doing a lot of research on the genetic forms of hydrocephalus. They have tested my family. So they've tested my husband, and I have a stepson, and then they've tested Parker and myself. And at this time, they haven't identified any kind of genetic correlation. The most common form affects males. It's X-linked. So females would be carriers, and then males would be affected. Since she's female, we kind of knew she didn't have the X-linked version of the genetic form of hydrocephalus. So the answer is yes, hers is not that we know of, but I mean, this study at Yale wasn't going on 10 years ago either. Yes. So who knows?
Now, she's going to be in the Special Olympics.
Yes.
Does she take part in any sports?
So she has been in gymnastics, and where she was, it wasn't by age, it was by ability. Okay. So she was in the very beginning level class for years, which she was completely fine with. So she was the tallest by far because there were all the little 4-year-olds that were coming in, taking the introductory class that would go on after, a couple semesters and move on to the second level class or whatever. So Parker stayed in that introductory class, I don't even remember how many years. And I do remember the day that she was actually moved to level 2 was like a big deal in our house. And it's great. So, she's not doing gymnastics right this semester, and she's kind of come in and out of it, but so gymnastics, but she's not Nadia Comaneci.
You said there's research being done.
Lots of research. Anything
on the horizon that may be a treat hydrocephalus?
So the ETV surgery, there's a lot of research being done, and I'm connected to because I'm pretty connected in the hydrocephalus world, and I'm connected to a research program out of Boston that they have some promising and then some not so promising research on developing the ETV that would work in infants. Because ideally, if she could have been treated that doesn't have a device that has a success rate that's higher. I mean, there are children that have had that procedure as infants that are successful, and then they live device-free. So there's risks that you don't have with that particular procedure. So that's one. And then I know they're working on some medication, but those aren't for the forms of hydrocephalus that she has. So for some forms, there's great research, and I'm a co-chair of the Hydrocephalus Association in Oklahoma, and I'm actually speaking at the Hydrocephalus Association national meeting in July in Austin. So I am very hydrocephalus changed not only her life but mine too, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you would have changed from her treatment in the past?
Well, if it didn't have to be surgical, I mean, you never want to see, your child in pain.
Yes.
And, there was a time where her shunt malfunctioned, and it took about 9 months in order to figure out exactly what was going wrong with it. So she would have episodes of screaming and pain where she would cry and just beg me, "Mommy, make my head stop hurting." And it was just gut punch, if you can even imagine a gut punch, for 9 months, and it was by far our darkest days. So that was in 2012 when that had occurred. It just took a long time to properly diagnose the malfunction and then have it treated. And since it's been treated, she doesn't have those episodes anymore. And then epilepsy is another thing that I would take back from her, but I wouldn't change her innocence and her zest for life and the fact that she tries her hardest. And just, I think that hydrocephalus was really part of who she is, and I wouldn't change that. So if I had to give up all of the pain, I don't know, if she would be a different person. I don't know. So I don't know if there's things that, other than removing the pain, I think, she has surpassed everyone's expectations and, beyond what we had believed. So,
what type of support do you get for the hydrocephalus? You get state support or federal support?
So, and all those, the support systems are primarily income based. Okay. So we don't receive any kind of support. Now, when she turns 18, I don't know what that's going to look like. So if you have a child with a disability, they look at your own personal income, and then it's the income before the need. So because we are well insured, we are beyond the income requirements for any kind of Social Security disability with her, then I don't receive any support from a financial aspect. But that could change when she is an adult and then has her own income, which would probably be compromised and low. So at this time, though, I know Oklahoma does have, it's called TEFRA, and it is non-income based help. And so she doesn't have needs that would necessitate that. But I know it's available should she ever have those needs that go beyond what her ability is today. And that could change tomorrow. I mean, really good.
What are your expectations?
For her?
Yes. To
live a happy, long life, and her just to flourish and whatever she chooses to do. I hope people, because as she's gotten older, I have worried about what her life is going to look like as an adult. So when she was very young, she has a little bit of challenges with interpersonal skills, and so she doesn't really know sometimes how to start a conversation with someone, so she would just say, "What's your name?" But she would say, "What's your name?" to people that she knows their name. Like, it was just an opener because of the problems that she has with her interpersonal skills. And so she doesn't do that as much now, but I worry that those kind of quirks that she has that people just don't understand as she gets older and into a less insulated world, I don't know what that's going to look like. And people have to be patient with her. And she'll ask me the same question 50 times. And I know that it's because of her condition that she doesn't remember the answer. She, like, to the core, does not remember. She's not trying to be annoying, or, she's not malicious in her asking these questions over and over and over again. She genuinely doesn't remember. And so I worry that interacting with people who don't know her, because right now school knows her, our circle of friends knows her, obviously she lives in my house, I know her father knows her, but what does that look like long term, and will she live with us forever? I don't know. And epilepsy is the biggest piece that I think of her condition. Living independently, let's see, only 40% of those with hydrocephalus can live independently. So 60% don't live independently. So I don't know what that looks like. So I want a bright future, and I want her to be happy and healthy, but where that is, I don't know.
Does your husband have the same zest that you have?
A zest? Do I have a zest?
Yes.
Well, he's an accountant. So does that answer your question? I've kind of become the hydrocephalus fairy godmother in a lot of respects, because I know that early in my pregnancy, when my daughter was diagnosed, I had my girlfriend whose son has hydrocephalus, and then I also connected with many, many, many people online, and I pay it forward. Parker's not as challenged as some kids with hydrocephalus. However, and I've seen a lot with hydrocephalus, so I am involved in the Hydrocephalus Association. I'm also the administrator for the largest group on Facebook that has to do with hydrocephalus. So I, daily help people and pay it forward because of the help I received. So she changed my life. Like, there's no doubt in my world, but my husband does not partake in all of the crazy, because I'll be on my phone, and if I'm at home, try not to be on my phone, and he'll say, what are you doing or whatever, and I'm like, my answer is usually I'm saving hydrocephalus babies, which is like the truth. So, and he knows that I literally have families that have thanked me, and they wanted to terminate their children with hydrocephalus. It's not uncommon for a baby to be terminated in utero because of medical. Yes. So it's a medical termination. So it's not something that, they wanted to have an abortion, but knowing that your child, the chance of disability is very high, a lot of folks decide to terminate. And so I have tried to say, yes, there are ugly parts to hydrocephalus. There's no doubt about it. If I could change treatment options, I would. But, if you can handle it, you can do it, and I will help you walk this path. So I literally save hydrocephalus babies. That's my passion.
Anything else you want to talk about? Anything?
I don't know. I wish she was here.
Yes.
Because
like
she
to
is.
meet her.
Yeah. Well, and if we have a different time,
I'll be back.
I'm happy to have her come in, because she is really, I don't know. Everyone that meets her, I think they're blessed personally. Yes. And I may be a tick partial, but
yes.
She just has this great personality. So.
Well, ma'am, this is an excellent interview.
Oh, good. I didn't say Satan. I didn't.
I want to thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And
I love talking about her, obviously.
Well, I've learned a lot.
Yeah. And it's hard for me because I normally write about it.
Yes.
I normally don't. We did a documentary for TLC in 2016. Mm-hmm. So there's actually a documentary about our family. And so they came out and filmed us, and it's aired several, it'll air on Discovery Health or whatever. And so we actually have a documentary, and it's neat because it was her at that time in her life, So I usually am this and not this.
Yes.
But I'll do this too.
Yes. Okay. Well, again, this is April 21st, 2022. My name is Joe Todd. This has been an interview with Amy Hendrix in Oklahoma City.
Yep.
Thank you.